The digital transition. The Digital Transition, brought to you by Fulton Trotter Digital, a podcast series created to assist those tasked with implementing digital strategies, where we will share our knowledge and experiences to support you in your transition. Welcome to the Digital Transition, podcast number 3. I'm your host, Nathan Hildebrandt, and today I'm talking to Colin Mann. Colin is from PCSG Australia and is currently working with the Department of Transport and Main Roads, or TMR, from the Queensland Government. Today we are discussing the process broadly that PCSG has led in assisting TMR with their digital transition. Thanks for being here, Colin.
Yeah, thanks for the invite, Nathan.
Firstly, Colin, for those that are not aware of who you are, can you share with the listeners what your current role is at PCSG and the journey that you've taken to get where you are today?
Yeah, sure. So currently I'm one of 2 consulting directors here with PCSG Australia. Between the 2 of us, we are establishing an outpost here of our UK firm. I'll give you a sense of my background, my journey. So I started my career as a systems engineer in the aviation space. I specifically worked in aircraft engineering, aircraft maintenance for a few years. That's certainly an industry in which you get a very good sense for the importance of asset information, asset data, the importance of that from a whole life cost, whole life effectiveness, and indeed safety perspective in operations. I moved from there about 10 years ago into PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC, in the UK, where I was part of their infrastructure and capital project advisory practice. There for many years, worked on various different advisory engagements, lots of different client types. But in my last few years there, I led our charge in technology and digitization in the industry. And I finished off in my final year there. I worked on the PwC's work on the BIM benefit measurement methodology, which was released sometime last year into the public domain, and maybe some of your listeners will have seen that. So I spent a long time there working very closely with the Digital Built Britain program and the leaders of that program, including Mark Bew, who is the chairman of PCSG. And at that point, I decided to move to Australia, seek sunnier climes, and start work with PCSG down here.
So you briefly touched on Mark Bew and PCSG. Obviously, you've just talked about a bit about yourself. Can you share with us a little bit more about what PCSG does, I guess who they are, and then also kind of the role that Mark Bew has played in the UK?
Yeah, certainly. So I'll start with Mark. So Mark is our chairman of the firm. He's also for many years chaired the UK's Digital Built Britain program. He remains a strategic advisor to that program now. But in the years in which he ran that, they were the years in which the UK established its mandate for BIM and established the level 2 target that UK government agencies are seeking to achieve now, and therefore effectively led the UK government client adoption of BIM and the development of that within the industry. And certainly that work, along with the work of some of his key directors there, is what inspired me to join. I guess who PCSG are, if I try to summarize it, many people still see the construction industry as being at the bottom of the pile in terms of industries from a level of digitization and technology adoption point of view. I'm not sure I quite agree with that, but certainly they are seen as towards the bottom of that league table. And PCSG basically exists to move that construction industry up that league table. That's what they're there to do. So in terms of the services PCSG offer, it's a fairly broad range of consultancy and advisory services in this space. So anything from smart city strategies, sustainable communities type strategies, digital transformation work, implementation planning, and certainly with a lot of focus on BIM implementation and BIM adoption as well. Client types, we spend more time than anything else with government agencies as clients, so owners of large infrastructure, owners and procurers. Also, private clients in that space as well. So, for example, utility companies or large estate owners. And I'd say that the majority of our work recently in that space and with the government clients has been in developing business cases, strategies, and implementation plans for either BIM specifically or broader digital implementation, broader digital transformation as well. We also have a product side of our business too, which we combine with our consulting. Specifically there, we provide a particular common data environment platform alongside our consultancy services that's known as GeoConnect Plus. That's a platform that's been selected recently as the CDE for the High Speed 2 program in the UK. But I'd say that to summarise the work that we're doing with TMR at the moment around strategy is very typical for us, and particularly in the Australian market.
You've talked about PCSG and the role you guys are playing at the front end. You know, you're essentially the front end service provider for strategy, which I personally feel is probably the most important place to start for any organisation before they jump into the BIM realm in terms of, you know, in essence, kind of going about it and going, oh, well, I just want some BIM, thanks. So you guys come in and essentially working with their company, understand their objectives and their organisation and what the actual needs are to actually generate that outcome.
That's right, yeah. So we like to start with that message of why they're doing it, and indeed the business case for doing it. I mean, there is a balance between getting on and doing something practical versus working through the top-down strategy. And whilst we would advocate doing a little bit of both together is a good idea, as long as pilots, proof of concepts, they're good ideas to get people excited, get people engaged, start testing a few things, as long as they're done carefully, so you don't burn too much budget, you don't start off on the wrong foot. But yeah, from a strategic perspective, we are often starting with that essentially a business case, which yes includes the economics of why they're trying to do that, the cost benefit of doing it, but also very much where they're going as an organisation strategically and how a digital transformation is going to help them do that.
Now that kind of leads me into my next question, and from my perspective, I'm a bit of a Simon Sinek fan, and I have to ask you, why do you think that TMR have thought or sought to embrace digital processes?
Well, I think that TMR really recognise the opportunity. I think that it's clear from their position, and I'm sure most government departments are in the same boat. They absolutely need to do more with less at the moment, both from a capital delivery and an asset management perspective. TMR are very much a asset management organisation, and they understand and they certainly feel the pain of incomplete or poor information in their asset base. It's very clear to them the cost of reprocuring information, resurveying assets. So they're very keen to address that kind of position and do more with less using available technology and available process. I think they also really understand the criticality of great design when typically they're building assets that are going to sit there for 100 years. So they understand the importance of that as well. But I think, so kind of away from that economic argument, I think that TMR really want to be a progressive progressive organisation, and they really want to recruit the best of the next generation of engineers. And typically, that generation, they really want to work with a digitally enabled, exciting organisation. So there's that element as well. So starting with that why message and understanding why you're doing it economically, managerially, organisationally, vital to keep your program on track, really.
Yeah, and I guess it's there for a few purposes. Obviously, de-risking projects and identifying issues before they occur on site, and the challenge of managing assets that have to live for 100 years and sustainably. Now, I guess from my perspective, the question is TMR's decision to proceed with their digital transition, was it in response to the Department of Infrastructure, Local Government and Planning's State Infrastructure Plan that was released in 2016 that mandated BIM delivery for infrastructure projects from 2023, or was it something else?
So I'd say that was certainly a driver. I mean, it's certainly fair to say that TMR had started on this journey before 2016. That they were starting to do some early work in this space as early as 2013, 2014, even as early as 2011, depending on how you define it. And that's of course a debatable point. But there's no question that that state infrastructure plan released in 2016 spurred them on a little bit and gave them that bit of extra traction. I think that the importance of that from TMR perspective is it builds confidence in the industry of broader adoption, and it's not just going to be something that TMR may choose to do for a period of time. What that state infrastructure plan is doing, and the recent release of the principles is making it very clear that this is something that Queensland Government are committed to. That will drive broader adoption across other government agencies, and hopefully it will accelerate the rate at which suppliers and industry partners are able to respond to this as a requirement. I think also TMR see the opportunity and in part their responsibility to lead this a little bit as well, as perhaps the biggest procurer in the state. If they don't lead it, if they don't get on with it, it's going to be difficult to get this off the ground. And I've no doubt that some of the case studies and experience from TMR will really help other agencies as well.
Well, it's good to see the pioneering that TMR are doing within Queensland as an agency of the government. I guess now moving on to kind of the process side of things. So, TMR have worked and started to embrace digital processes for, maybe 5 years, depending on the date that you want to place in there. As much as you can do, can we talk through the process that you've done with TMR? Because obviously for the listeners that are here today, their interest is probably in implementing similar processes or implementing digital strategies as part of their organisation. Are you able to step through, in broad terms, the scope and approach that you've kind of come up with through PCSG to support their digital implementation?
Yeah, certainly. So, our approach with TMR has been relatively typical to the approach that we've taken with other government agencies, predominantly in the UK to date. What is typical again with TMR is that they have started their journey before they have spoken to us. It's not as if they are at ground zero. Lots of great work has been done already there. And therefore, a natural starting point for us is to provide an independent view of their actual current state and where they're at. So that's where we started. We would term that a health check of their BIM program, and we did that in a couple of different ways. We do have a framework for doing that, but essentially that we assess them against a standard, which effectively as an available standard, we assess them against the UK's BIM Level 2 benchmark, which ties into the PAS 1192 suite of standards. This was, of course, before 19650 had been released in any form. And we also benchmark them against other organisations as well, where we've worked with other organisations and we have very good insight into them. So that was both locally and against comparable transport agencies in the UK as well. And broadly speaking, we are assessing them on sort of procedural strengths, technology strengths, and capability of individuals and their staff base. That would be like the technical framework, if we would use to assess them, but also very much and just as importantly, assess them against the strength of their program, so their level of governance, the level of organisational commitment towards it, even the funding towards it, and the communications around it as well. So those kind of program success factors, if you like, we can assess them against as well. And as a result of that, a natural next step after that health check was to produce a roadmap for them. And this very much was in response to the state infrastructure strategy there and a plan to achieve the 2023 targets that were set out, but also a plan to allow TMR to establish the most benefit in the quickest period of time, really. So yes, a 5-year strategic plan with a lot of focus in the first year around capitalising on the work they'd already done, establishing a few quick wins, and really establishing that program across what is a complex organisation. So we completed that work a little while ago, earlier in 2018, and we're still engaged with them now, focusing on one particular aspect of that roadmap, although a very significant part of that, which is TMR's common data environment. So that is, at the moment, that's in a strategic phase, so looking at how they should approach a common data environment, to use the BIM terminology there, what it will need to achieve, its scope and its requirements. That's the phase that we're in now.
So I guess for our listeners out there, common data environment might be a new term for them. And, I think there's something worthwhile, I guess, diverting on probably just quickly. And I guess, what is a common data environment? And for a layperson that's not aware of this terminology and the British standards?
Yeah, so a common data environment, CDE, it is defined in the standards, although despite that, there's plenty of scope for interpretation anyway, and certainly plenty of scope in the way CDEs have been used and deployed in every industry, in every territory as well. So certainly even in the UK today, despite the fact that the BIM mandate has been around for a long time, you see very different approaches to the CDE. So I guess to start with, technology-wise, it's not necessarily a single piece of software or a single platform. In any complex organisation, it would usually be a suite of systems that are hopefully working together. I guess there'll always be some common factors we would expect to see. So we would always expect probably a cloud-based collaborative part of that, which allow people from different organisations to collaborate, communicate, and share information effectively. That's ultimately the heart of what the CDE is trying to do. I guess different strategies around that in terms of who owns and who operates that CDE. That's probably the greatest difference that we see. This has, in many cases, in many significant projects, has been delegated to supply chain and sits typically at tier 1, with like a portal access for client and a portal access for lower tier contractors. But for larger organisations, larger client organisations and government departments, more and more so now, this is being owned by them, operated by them, and forms part of their BIM requirement to engage with at a level there their common data environment.
Yeah, so essentially it's a large filing cabinet that's neatly organised, which is a move forward in industry, considering how people like to file things.
So even if it was only that would be a step forward. Yeah.
In an ideal world. Yeah. So I guess you've talked through the two steps that you've taken so far in terms of capability assessments and strategic roadmaps, and step 3 being a common data environment. Where have TMR focused their efforts so far? Has it been technology implementations, standards development, or their people and their capabilities?
So certainly all three of those aspects exist on their roadmap. I think that it's fair to say that they started on the process side, which again is quite common, quite typical, in part because it requires probably the least investment upfront to think about that, and it also is probably the one thing you absolutely need to do in order to run even the most basic proof of concept would be to have some sense of process. And I'm including within, when I say process, I'm including within that kind of definition, again, to use a few BIM terms around defining your information requirements at whatever level. So organizationally and your asset information requirements, and then your employees' information requirements, ultimately your demands that go out to the supply chain of the data and information that you want. So TMR started there with working up initial versions of those to allow them to attempt some proof of concept deployments of BIM. Also bolted onto the side of that some procedures. There is such a thing as the TMR BIM guide, which would cover things like authoring standards, level of detail, things like that some of your listeners will be familiar with. Again, just to allow suppliers to initially engage with TMR from a BIM perspective and start to produce digital deliverables that are in line with what TMR are expecting. Increasingly now, the focus is turning, with that established and feedback coming in constantly to TMR on those procedures and on those information requirements. Attention now turning, as I was describing, more to the technology side and to the common data environment platform that they're looking at. And alongside that, we'll be working with them to look at other aspects of BIM technologies as well, and authoring type tools and analytical tools. But very quickly, capability will become almost the critical path for TMR, as it is with probably every organisation that we've worked with, and indeed, probably still the number one problem in most UK clients at the moment is the ability to access and hang on to enough digitally orientated staff that can help you with this. So capability training will become an increasing part of TMR's plan.
That sounds like a big challenge, and it sounds like it's one of the biggest challenges that we are going to face. So I guess you've touched lightly on, the journey that TMR has taken and obviously the work that they've done since 2013. And you've talked about the methodology in an ideal sense going from top down, but then obviously the benefits of potentially working hand in hand with some pilot projects, for example, kind of providing feedback to this, like a feedback loop to the system. How have TMR actually attended any projects or pilot projects with digital deliverables yet?
Yes, they have. Yeah, they've attended a few. They're focusing at the moment on some of their larger schemes, so typically $100 million plus schemes for them. So that's the focus of their program at the moment, and where they see most benefit. So yeah, their employees' information requirements, to use the BIM term, the digital requirements that sit in the case of TMR within their SWTCs and their broader contract documentation. They've gone out on a number of projects now, and those requirements do exist now for a certain number of TMR projects. Also, the need for contractors to produce their BIM execution plan or BIM management plan is in there, and to provide digital models as well. And those requirements are continuously being refined and negotiated with suppliers. But yeah, absolutely, they've been out there, and we've seen TMR have seen full sets of digital deliverables come back for a number of projects now.
So, from the experiences from TMR, is the infrastructure delivery supply chain ready and capable of delivering projects? Obviously, the scale of project would mean larger infrastructure delivery guys or building contractors may be capable of doing that. Have they found any kind of pushback at all yet?
Yes, certainly some pushback, and the supply response inevitably has been mixed. I think generally, fair to say, enthusiastic, but the level of capability at the start of contracts has often been mixed, and that's entirely to be expected. I think that some of the suppliers that TMR will engage with, this will be their first time attempting to produce BIM deliverables and to engage in a BIM type process. Some perhaps reliant on other consultancies and suppliers to help them through that process. So a lot of learning going on, certainly. I think interestingly, TMR have seen examples of sort of over delivery as well. We've certainly seen that. We saw that a lot in the UK, and seeing it again here, where interpreting digital requirements is not necessarily easy, and indeed writing them down is not necessarily easy. So it's quite it's not uncommon to be in a position where a contractor or a design consultant is delivering what they can, and that might go over and above what was actually required at the time. So incurring a little bit of unnecessary cost at different parts of the journey. So I've seen some examples of that as well. That's all good learning for TMR.
So the positive being, I guess, that what will happen is that it will align with the policies that were released in 2016 with regards to the targets of essentially delivering projects over $50 million by 2023, because I'll have gone through that pilot phase and learnt on the run essentially over the next 3 to 4 years.
That's right. I mean, TMR's approach is fully in line with those principles, and indeed they'll have influenced some of those principles as well from some of their early adopters. I think, a lot of those principles, for example, the focus on open data is absolutely part of TMR's strategy, and we'll see TMR increasingly start to embrace things like the IFC standard. I think that there are examples within those principles that are equally, whilst part of TMR's plan, are really starting to be examples of the bigger challenges that departments have in kind of complying with those principles and implementing BIM. To give you an example, one of those principles is, if I paraphrase it, is to maintain BIM through the life of an asset. That is clearly a sensible thing to do, and it is a way in which benefit is realised through BIM. But it's not necessarily an easy thing to do, and it's certainly not something that TMR today is geared up to do. They've created an archive, an asset information management system that is based on CAD design and drawings, and indeed up until not too long ago, physical drawings, hard copy drawings. So they've got to work out a new process and a new technology stack for maintaining BIM. If I shorten it to that, for the life of assets, and that's not an insignificant part of the process.
No, it's going to be probably one of the biggest challenges from my perspective in terms of the methodology of actually maintaining live assets in a digital sense. So I guess one of the things we've touched on a lot is some of the challenges, and you've talked about people, and you've talked about through the pilot projects you've had scenarios where the supply chain have essentially provided kickback. What other kind of key challenges do you think that TMR have faced in their journey so far, that since they started back in 2011, 2013?
I mean, several key challenges. I think to try and pick out a couple that are perhaps less obvious, maybe. One of the real challenges that we will be continuing to work with them on is actually around benefit articulation. So, for people who work close to this space and understand what BIM does in the real world, the benefits can seem entirely intuitive, and I think for a lot of engineers they're very intuitive. But to explain that at an executive level in terms of dollars and cents is not easy at all, and to explain it to individuals in terms of how it will benefit them and benefit them in their job, it's not easy, and it's a lot of communication that has to happen to gain traction and buy into a program. So benefit articulation, and a difficult challenge. I think to mention another one, it seems obvious to say the complexity of the organisation, but actually, to give you a particular instance of that, the number of third parties that TMR have to engage with their asset information and their design deliverables is very, very significant. And really, when you're thinking about back to benefits, you think about the benefits you're trying to realise. If you're having to switch to let's say an analog way of processing information in order to interact with a third party, you can quickly start to burn the benefit that you were trying to gain. So trying to bring some of your third-party stakeholders along with you on the journey is very complex and a real challenge. And as we alluded to earlier, I think going forward, increasingly it'll be about attracting and retaining the right type of client, staff base to run these processes is going to be.
So I guess touching on that, the scenario you were talking about there with having challenges of working on old formats. My greatest interest is actually how this is actually going to create a substantial amount of duplication with local authorities and the councils. And now, TMR own and manage a portion of the road network around Queensland, and then each of the local authorities that it interacts with owns and manages and operates their own local streets. I know that some local authorities do investigate or are currently investigating or do utilise 3D models for DA assessment. And I know that the Brisbane City Council have a digital model of their CBD. You know, what would be your thoughts or suggestions for our local authorities out there that may be listening, or people that are working for a local authority, in regards to investigating this? It's almost a no-brainer. You've got to get in quick.
Yeah. Obviously, we would advocate that, and we would really encourage that. I think that the benefits exist for those local councils as well. But it's a great example of that third-party complexity that I was talking about earlier. And for TMR to be able to interface with local councils as they have to do, using the same digital deliverables that they're using internally and that they've procured, it's these mechanisms, it's these fairly complex workflows, if you like, between third parties. That's where a lot of the benefit is actually gained from BIM. Being able to do this once and quickly and seamlessly and collaboratively, without having to revert back to a paper-based process, say in the worst case. That's where benefit is created, and breaking down that digital continuity, if you like, at any point. That's where you really start to suffer and start to lose the benefit of what you were trying to do in the first place, and people get disengaged with the program. But I think, as well as sort of, I guess, appealing to local councils to kind of get on board with it, and also being encouraged that many of them are, I think it also underlines the importance of state government strategy with this. So we're starting to see that elsewhere as well. Things like the New South Wales policies around smart places is seeking to tie in, this kind of infrastructure policy around BIM use with more local strategies around smart city planning and things like that. And that's why things like that are important. That's why getting BIM policy and principles out there in Queensland is fantastic. It's a great step forward. And lots more needs to be done on that space to kind of maintain that sense of a single digital approach to infrastructure and land use planning.
And I guess that kind of leads to a recently released document titled Transforming Southeast Queensland, the City Deal Proposition. So that was jointly released only a couple of weeks ago by the Queensland Government and the Council of Mayors. And in this 60-page document, in a couple of pages, it does address digital delivery in a couple of pages. I'm hoping that this report might actually act as a catalyst for our local authorities, at least in Southeast Queensland, to move forward with their digital transition in regards to, integrating with TMR or even adopting their processes internally. How hard do you think it would be actually for the local authorities to essentially, once TMR release their full requirements, how hard would it be, do you think, for local authorities to essentially adapt and take on board that kind of strategy at a local government level?
That's a good question. I think that I think the honest answer is that I think that at the moment it will be quite difficult. I think it's absolutely terrific to see documents like that, Transforming SEQ, to come out and to address the digital element within it. And I think it will provide local councils and local authorities that with that push. And I think that combined with seeing some of the technological outputs that will come out of organisations like TMR will also sort of open people's eyes to the benefits of it. I think where we're at, and this is true in here in New South Wales, Victoria as well, is that we are seeing some good descriptions of where this is going and what it is, and probably to a lesser extent, but ideally we'll see a bit more of this. What are the benefits of doing this? What I think local authorities really are going to need is more guidance and more help on how to do it. So you take an example like the desire to create an SEQ digital twin, for example, is in that document. Hugely supportive of that kind of initiative. Again, as someone very close to this, I intuitively understand the benefits of that, but they're not necessarily easy to articulate. So articulating the benefit of it is something that has to be done, and then really trying to get to that next level of, okay, how do we do that? What are the nuts and bolts? What are the things that have to happen at the local authority level that are going to align with the state government, state agency level, such that a digital twin can be created, and therefore what does it look like?
And be useful.
And be useful, yeah.
And actually deliver benefits.
Yeah. So publishing the use cases around that and really bringing those to life is what I think local authorities are really going to need, so they can actually sort of visualize and understand how they play a part in this.
What do you think would be the key takeaways and the lessons that you would have learnt working with TMR that other departments within the Queensland Government are about to start embracing on? So over the coming months, they've got to start acting, and projects will start to be delivered from July 1, 2019 in line with this policy. What would be your key takeaway that you'd make a suggestion to these agencies and how they should step in the same footsteps, I guess, that TMR have already put forward?
Sure. So I'll limit myself to one, albeit it's quite a big one. I think that it's very important to realise there is a difference between compliance with BIM policy or BIM principle or standard and generating benefit for your organisation. Both are important, and I think that it is easier to generate compliance. So my main takeaway, I think, would be you really don't underestimate the importance and effort it takes to really meticulously plan how you're going to realise benefit from this process. Another way to think about that is, don't think of it as a BIM adoption program or BIM implementation program. I think if you start that way, you're probably doomed to failure. I think you have to think about it as a transformation, whether you term it digital transformation or otherwise, because this program stops when you have changed the way you do things at a BAU level. So it's business as usual to do this, and you're realising the benefits that you set out to achieve. All too often those benefits are written down at a relatively high level and they're fairly generic. And then an organisation will get on with applying a standard. But that's not the outcome of these programs. The outcome is digital transformation to deliver benefit. So focusing on that and really planning that all the way through to benefit realisation is probably my, albeit complex, only one takeaway.
I have one final question for you, and this is the one that I'm looking to ask all of my guests, and you pretty much have probably covered it throughout, that last answer that you actually provided. But what does BIM mean to you?
So I would answer that question, I guess to add to everything I've said so far today, I think I would summarise BIM there as client ownership of data. If I have to put it in one sentence or 4 words, I think if you're a client, it's your data. So BIM for me is you deciding what it is, when you get it, and how you get it. And if the way you've procured data before, the way you've received it before from your suppliers is anything other than absolutely optimal for you, then BIM is your opportunity to change that.
Yeah, well, that sounds perfect, doesn't it? It's actually taking control once again, which is something that they've kind of let go of the wheel of or relied upon others to assist them with. But Colin, mate, thanks very much for taking the time to sit down with us today and discussing the digital journey that you've had with TMR and how PCSG has actually worked through that process with them over the last couple of years. And I look forward to seeing them kind of trailblazing more moving forward in the next couple of years and essentially delivering benefits for Queenslanders in terms of getting better quality assets or realising more asset for the taxpayers' dollars. So for more information on TMR's digital transition and PCSG, please head to our website and find the links to the various web pages and documents that we've discussed today if you'd like to do some further reading. So I look forward to sharing our next podcast with you in a fortnight's time. Until then, good luck with your digital transition. If you would like assistance with your digital transition, please contact us at digital@fultontrotter.com.au. For more information, or if you'd like to continue the discussion in the comments section, head over to our website, thedigitaltransition.com. Remember to subscribe so you don't miss out on future podcasts. We would also appreciate it if you provide us with a rating and take the time to provide us with a review. Thanks for listening to The Digital Transition, brought to you by Fulton Trotter Digital. The Digital Transition.